Hello, welcome to the Wildline podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. So I've kind of been out a bit over the last couple of weeks, been traveling a lot, day job's been super busy. So I decided to do a little comeback show here with a Black Panther preview show. I feel like this movie is special. Right, and that's why I kind of want to dedicate a whole show to it. Normally I do the weekend reviews, and sometimes I do the weekend previews, but this one just feels like a weighty movie that we need to really talk about and do deep dives on. Obviously, it's opening tonight, I guess across the world, at least domestically it's opening. It's already opened in like South Korea and the UK. This movie is special for a lot of reasons. One, obviously, you have the fact that it is an MCU movie, Marvel Cinematic Universe, the biggest studio, the biggest genre of film right now, comes out of MCU. Like, they are the hit factory. And the fact that they decided to make a movie with an African-American majority cast is amazing and cool and interesting. So that's one reason why it is worth discussing in depth. On the other side of it, just looking at from a business perspective, it is a movie that, as of a couple of months ago, was looking like an origin story from MCU. You're talking well over 50 million, probably under 100 million, somewhere in the 70 to 80 million dollar range for this movie. That has changed completely, right? As of tracking 3 weeks ago, we were no longer in that range. We were in the 100 to 120 range, and those were official industry trackings. And that comes from customer surveys. Just, hey, are you aware of this movie? Are you going to go see it? Stuff like that, questions like that. So from those surveys, they were looking at 100 to 120 million dollars. Now, since then, the last 3 weeks, it's just gone up and up and up. So I figured it'd be a really fascinating movie to just talk about and preview and see if we can't guess where Black Panther is going to go, just because it's just one of the strangest tracking movies I've seen in a very, very long time. It reminds me a little bit of Beauty and the Beast last March, where going into it, we were talking, probably over 100 million, maybe 120, but as we got closer and closer to that movie premiering, the tracking just started to go up and up and up. And also at the same time, the hype began to sort of like permeate the air. Like, the Black Panther hype has been going on for at least a year, but over the last couple of months, it's just been incessant. The moment we got out of the holidays, it was nothing but Black Panther hype over the last couple of months. So it's one of those movies that didn't necessarily come out of nowhere. It's not coming out of nowhere. We all knew about this movie. But the level and size of its audience and the level of hype that it is getting did come out of nowhere, because this was an 80 to 100 million dollar movie as of a month ago, and now we're talking estimates that are pushing 200 million dollars for the 4-day. So it's something phenomenal or strange has happened, and we're going to try and figure out what's going on. So let's just walk through right now what the industry is saying for this film over its President's Day weekend, so it is a holiday weekend. So a lot of the estimates are going to be 4 days, some are going to be 3 days, but I'll talk about the 4 days for the most part. A Variety is saying $170 million for the 4-day. That is a little bit higher than what the industry is saying. The industry overall, I don't know what they mean by industry. It's got to be a conglomeration of different trackers. The industry is saying 155 to 172 for the 4-day. Disney, of course, is coming in below these. They want to temper expectations so that on Monday and Tuesday, when the official numbers come out, we can say, hey, look, it did $30 million higher than we thought it was going to do. Disney is saying it's 150 for the 4-day. Hollywood Reporter is saying a 165 for the 4-day. Box Office Mojo is the outlier, saying 185 for the 3-day and 210 for the 4-day. Now, keep in mind, as of 3 weeks ago, official tracking from the industry was saying 100 to 120 million dollars just 3 weeks ago. So even in the last 3 weeks, the picture's just completely changed on this film. And to put it into context, I think it makes sense to at least walk through what's been going on in the MCU pretty quickly. just to give us an idea of, where this would fit in terms of those grosses and stuff like that. So we just go backwards. Obviously Spider-Man Homecoming put out by Sony, still kind of counts as MCU though. Opened to 117, closed out at 334. That was in July of last year. Guardians 2, also last year, May of last year, opened up at 146, closed out at 389. And these performances are very good. There's nothing, there weren't like runaway successes necessarily like Wonder Woman was, but they're very solid performances for MCU and for Disney, in Spider-Man's case, Sony. But at the same time, they were in line with expectations. I think Spider-Man opened a lot softer than people thought it was going to, but then its legs kicked in at like week 4 through 8, and really had a lot of staying power through the end of the summer, mostly because I think nothing else came out in late summer, like August. It was like dead until it came out on early September. Guardians played right to expectations, opened at 146, which even the funny thing about this though is that the expectations for a movie like Guardians 2 were outrageous. Right? If you think about the original Guardians, opened up in August and did 94, and that was considered to be like amazing. The fact that the second one was expected to open at 146 and close out, just shy of 400 is insane. But that's what it did. It did hit those really outrageous expectations. And then you got to go back to Doctor Strange. That feels like, God, that was like the fall of 2016. That feels like forever ago. Doctor Strange opened up at 85 and closed it at 232. And that's where Black Panther was situated. Solo film. It's not an Avengers. It's not a Captain America with every character in it. It's a new character, at least in the MCU cinematic universe. So the expectation was probably about just sub 100, close out at, mid 200s, was the expectation, I think, of Marvel and Disney going into this February. But obviously something has completely changed. And then keep on going back. Captain America also came out in 2016, opened at 179, closed out at 400. Now we're talking about that level, right? We're done with the Doctor Strange origin level, sub 100 opening weekend. Now we're looking at a Civil War Captain America, which is essentially Avengers 3. Let's all be honest, right? Some people are saying 185 for the 3-day, as a Box Office Mojo is saying, 210 for the 4-day, which would beat Captain America pretty handedly, at least Civil War. And the movie before that was Ant-Man, an MCU, $57 million opening to close it at 180. And here you notice the difference, right? Like we talked about Doctor Strange a little bit, Ant-Man. That was where Black Panther was supposed to go. And now it has reached this upper echelon of the most successful movie series of the last 20, 30 years. And so the question is, what happened here, right? What was going on? Like, why is this so popular right now? And I think one thing to note before we even get into sort of the production of it or how it came to be, it's important to note that the quality of the film, as we know it right now, is apparently fantastic, right? So if you look at the Rotten Tomatoes score from critics, it's sitting at 98% with 222 reviews. That's gotta be one of, if not the best reviewed films ever on Rotten Tomatoes. It has to be in like the top 3 all time. Like Lady Bird was number 1 for a while, but this has to beat it with that many number of reviews. Top critics, 43 reviews, 100% rotten. 100% fresh. Average rating 9 out of 10. So obviously when the quality of this film became apparent, that upped your hype, right? The hype went from 120s, 130s. I'm pretty sure these reviews bumped it up to the 150, 160, now 170 and on up range. 87 score on Metacritic, which is a very tough website to get a good score on, especially for movies. 87 is phenomenal. Just to compare it to the art films that are out now for the Oscars, Phantom Thread got a 90. So it's like among critics, it is seen as this honestly monumental film. Just to give you the critics' consensus from Rotten Tomatoes, Black Panther elevates superhero cinema to new thrilling heights while telling one of MCU's most absorbing stories and introducing some of its most fully realized characters. Gushing, glowing reviews from the critics. So that is definitely one reason why we went from the low 120s, or sorry, the low 100s into the 150, 160 range. Is because of the reviews. I mean, there's no way you could argue against that. The moment the Rotten Tomatoes stuff started to come out, it just put the hype machine into overdrive. And I think, too, you also have to realize that we haven't had a huge movie since Last Jedi. Obviously, we had all the Oscar films, but those are tiny movies, to be honest with you. They make like 30, at best $40-50 million in the United States. Those have all been playing, or have been out for the last couple of months. The last really big film we had was The Last Jedi, or like a cultural event. Before that, you obviously had Thor and the other stuff going on in the fall, and It before that. It's almost like it goes It, Thor, Last Jedi, and now Black Panther is like the real true tent poles of the last 4 or 5 months. And then March is going to be insane. Like, March is so overloaded this year, it's disgusting. It feels like July. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So Black Panther, is coming on at the right time. 3-4 years ago, we wouldn't have talked about February as a big month. Usually it's in the bottom 3 of months. But ever since 50 Shades came out, I guess that would have been 2 years ago. And then Deadpool, of course, which came out. Was Deadpool 2016 or 2017? I don't know. I think it's 2016. Really changed everything. It changed February. It changed what it was all about. You could open a movie during Valentine's Day weekend or right around that and have it do insanely well. Like the first 50 Shades did like what, $80 million? Something crazy like that. And then obviously Deadpool, which I was a big naysayer on it doing that well. I thought it was going to open like $50 million just because like the comic book genre is getting tired. People are kind of bored with it. And it's February. Who opens a movie in February, especially a comic book movie that's supposed to be a tentpole and ends up doing like 130 something. So that everything, the month really changed with those two movies in the last few years. And so that allowed Black Panther to be scheduled for February, because if those movies hadn't come along and really opened up the month, I think Black Panther would have been pushed to a March or maybe even a summer release. But it turns out that the fact that it's opening in February now has really, I think, given it an advantage, just because it's been so quiet since the start of 2018 that it has an open runway, and that hype, it's almost like bacteria in a petri dish. Right, in the right setting, a really good big blockbuster film can start the hype machine. And when the hype machine starts going, it's hard to stop it. And I think the hype machine was going super strong 3 weeks ago, and the reviews come in, and it just like amps it up and up and up, and it ends up becoming like sort of a feedback loop where everybody's talking about it on social media, everybody's talking about it in person, and it just becomes part of the mass cultural conscience, where everybody's aware of Black Panther, everybody's aware that it's good, and that sort of plants the seeds for a $180 million opening. Very similar to what happened with Jurassic World. A couple weeks before that, people were thinking like, I wonder if it's going to break 100 million. Like, it could be a total disaster. Then as we got closer to Jurassic World, that hype machine took over. And it's really hard to pinpoint what it is about certain films that gets people going, that gets them in that hype feedback loop. I think with the Black Panther, it's the fact that most of the cast is African American, and that's something new and different, especially in a massive, huge blockbuster film. I think somebody said, and this could be totally wrong, but somebody said on Reddit or something like that this is the first majority African American cast for a major studio release since the 80s. I don't know. Maybe that's not true. That's what someone was saying. But that's definitely part of what's going on here. It feels different. It feels new. It feels fresh. And the question I have is sort of, has the hype for this gotten out of control? are these numbers legitimate? Does that make any sense? Because if we try and compare what the expectation now is for Black Panther, and let's just generally say it's between, Disney says 150, Box Office Mojo says 185 to 210. Let's just say it's in the 160 to 180 range right now is the consensus. That's a massive, massive opening, right? And it's hard to say how big that really is when you think about like Batman vs Superman opened at 166. It's going to be bigger than that apparently. Iron Man 3 opened at 174. Beauty and the Beast opened at 174. Captain America Civil War 179. Age of Ultron is in play at 191. Those seem Marvel's Avengers 207, Jurassic World 208, and then we have the Star Wars films 220 for Last Jedi, 247 for The Force Awakens. The fact that Black Panther has reached those heights seems a little bit, I'm not going to go against the tracking because the tracking says what it says. It does seem a little bit unrealistic to me, right? And the reason I say that is normally in box office tracking, they underestimate how well a film's going to do in these situations. Jurassic World was a perfect example. I believe tracking was like $40 to $50 million off on that film going into the Thursday when it got released. With Black Panther, you're talking, Deadpool was one of the biggest surprises ever in box office history. Ever. Like, absolutely ever. Did 132. The expectation now is that Black Panther is going to blast through 132, into the $50 million more range than that. I don't know. It seems like people are getting caught up in something, and, the data may be reflecting that hype and maybe inflating the potential of this film. I don't know. My gut says, and I'm, sometimes I'm very wrong. I was very wrong about Beauty and the Beast. I thought Beauty and the Beast was way overinflated. It turned out to be underinflated. What's a good sign here? What's a bad sign here? What's a win? What's a loss? Right? It's already a win, right? Black Panther making more than $100 million on opening weekend is a win. Black Panther going, flying past Spider-Man Homecoming at 117 is a massive win. And anything above the 120 mark is like a grand slam in the bottom of the ninth in the World Series. Like, it's just amazing. And on up. And the more higher it goes, the more interesting it is. But at the same time, the problem they're going to have now is this. The expectation is at least 150. If it doesn't break 150, there's going to be some rumblings of it underperformed. Why did it underperform? And you have all these think pieces about, are people racist? They don't want to see a movie. But that's going to create this whole troll sort of hot take culture surrounding the film, which I think is so stupid and so dumb, because the expectation now is at least 150 for the 3-day. I would say it's at least 150 for the 3-day. I don't know if it's going to be able to hit that. Those are really hard numbers to hit. And just to sort of like play around with like the potential here in terms of the theaters, number of theaters it's in, it's only in 4,020 theaters. Right, what sounds like a lot, but when you compare it to the biggest openings of the last 10 years, it's not actually huge. Most movies in the top 10 opened over 4,200 theaters, so it's already has that writing against it. It needs its per theater average to be pretty high. So let's just take a look and see for the 5-day what it would need to make. I'm sorry, for the 5-day. For the 3-day, what it would need to make in order to hit that bottom basement now expectation of $150 million for the weekend. You're looking at $37,000 per theater. That would put it right in line with Rogue One, with Deadpool, and with Hunger Games Catching Fire. So, you think about Rogue One. You think Black Panther is going to open the same as Rogue One? It's funny, like if you step back from the situation and you try to remove yourself from the hype and be rational about it, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It just seems like, wow, that's an outrageous number. Rogue One's a Star Wars movie. Obviously, Deadpool is a huge outlier, but I think about Hunger Games was a massive, massive franchise. And we're saying Black Panther is going to be in that echelon immediately. Totally possible. Tracking says that it's going to be that and much higher. My gut, as someone who's followed the box office for a long time, still is a little bit hesitant about saying 150 is like a given at this point. Box Office Mojo is saying like 185 for the 3-day. That is kind of ridiculous. That's putting it over Captain America Civil War, which opened in May 2016, essentially Avengers 3. That's a lot of cash. But let's look at Box Office Mojo. Let's look at both perspectives. So if it opens at 185 for the 3-day, which is the biggest prediction here by Box Office Mojo, in that number of theaters, I should say, you're looking at $46,000 per theater, which puts it well above Ultron, well above Captain America, like $4,000 per theater above Captain America. It puts it closer to the original Avengers, and that's the realm. It's above Ultron, but below the original Avengers. That seems outrageous to me. I don't know how that's going to be possible. Anything is possible in the box office, and I've certainly been wrong before. I just don't see how it's going to get those per theater numbers. I just don't see how it's going to happen. You would have to add so many extra screenings for it to really get there. And as much as Black Panther has been hyped so much, it has not reached the hype of an Avengers or a Last Jedi or an Ultron. There's not that built-in sort of extra screenings that's going to help it get into the mid 40 per K theater range. It's just not there. So what does my gut say here? I got to go sort of with, I'll take the tracking into account. I think it is, I think it's being skewed a bit just by the, I don't know. It seems like on the social media, I sound like I'm 88 years old. Maybe I am. It sounds like the tracking's getting skewed a bit. That's what it feels like, because those numbers just don't make a whole lot of sense for the film itself. Now, granted, got amazing reviews. It's MCU. It's kind of a fresh new take on the MCU world, an origin story. So I'll take that all into account. I just don't see how it gets into the 40K range per theater. That doesn't seem like it's really possible, or it doesn't seem like it's very probable. I should say it's totally possible. Doesn't seem very probable to me. So what do I think it's going to do? Right? I think we're more looking at a Guardians 2, maybe Dark Knight, $36,000 per theater, which would put it at about 144, about 145. That's what I'm thinking. Now I'm $40 million off of what Box Office Mojo is saying, and I'm a pretty big significant chunk off of what these other people are saying as well. I'm kind of, I'm higher than Disney, essentially, but I'm with the sort of industry tracking that says 155 to 172 for the 4-day. I'm thinking 145 for the 3-day. I'm not really good at 4-day estimates because I don't have a lot of data in my head for that. But that's what I'm going to say for it. And that would be amazing. This is why I think it kind of sucks, because I do feel like it's going to underperform compared to the outrageous predictions of places like Box Office Mojo, which I love. They're a great site. I'm looking at it right now. I look at it every show. It's an awesome, awesome website. I just think their prediction doesn't make a ton of sense. Variety and Hollywood Reporter are more in line with what I'm saying, 170, 165 for the 4-day. That kind of falls in line with what I'm saying, the 145 for the 3-day. But I get the feeling that it's going to do sub 150 for the 3-day, and people are going to be pissed off and upset about it. And then it's going to start this flame war online where the people are defending it, the MCU people, the sort of ideologues for Marvel are going to call everybody else who didn't see it a racist. And it's going to like go back and forth, and people didn't want to see it, say I'm not a racist, and it's like back and forth, which I think is super unfortunate and misses the entire point. You have Black Panther, an origin MCU movie, opening in the range of a massive, massive tentpole film in February, right? Like there's so many other stories to focus on outside of it hitting 150 or not. Like, it's already a massive win for MCU. I think if you take a step back from all the back and forth and the tracking and stuff, and you think about the comic book movie genre, it's just it's not going away, right? Like, people love these comic book movies, and like, sure, DCEU's had a really rough go of it. Justice League was a massive flop and huge disappointment for everybody involved. It was also leaked out that Zack Snyder was fired from Justice League, like I said he was, and no one would believe me. Back when Joss Whedon came in to take over, the cover story obviously was that he was a grieving father because of his daughter, which totally makes sense and is definitely part of it. But he was let go from that film because of his creative vision, right? And so DCEU's struggled a bit. They've had a hard time. MCU has just been flying, just cruising over the last 3 to 4 years. And I kind of wonder if it's ever gonna drag at all, if it's ever going to slow down in the next 3 to 4 years. We got Avengers Infinity coming out in, I think it's May, isn't it? Yeah. And then next year with the next one, are these things going to open to 220 million and just, crush $500 million domestically alone? Totally. It feels totally possible now but like 2-3 years ago, and I'm a skeptic, I'm pretty critical. I was like, oh man, like, I don't know how this genre is going to take all of this content, all this new content coming down the pike. But it looks totally fine. Like, I don't see any issues whatsoever with the MCU. It seems totally strong. No weaknesses whatsoever. You got Black Panther, you've got Infinity War coming out in May, you have Ant-Man sequel coming out in July. Then next year, I guess the next Avengers movie, no, it is coming out in May 2019. But before that, in March of 2019, you have Captain Marvel, Brie Larson, and Spider-Man 2 Homecoming is coming out in 2019. And then it's just like nonstop. It's nonstop through 2020. And, it's interesting. Like, at every moment, I think that the comic book movie genre or MCU is going to slip up. They actually do the reverse, and they take it one step higher. Black Panther opening over $150 million is insanity. It doesn't match up with anything that we've seen in the box office over the last 20, 30 years. And so I think it's important to highlight that Black Panther in and of itself is a massive change at the box office, if only because it just means MCU is winning more and more and more. We've never seen anything like this. I hate the word unprecedented, but it is unprecedented. Like, it's absolutely outrageous. So I will have a show on Sunday to review the top 10 for the weekend, and we'll see if I'm right. We'll see if my 140 for the 3-day is going to happen, or if I'm a complete idiot and I'm totally underestimating it, like I think I probably am. We'll see that on Sunday. Anyways, thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Wildline Podcast.